Hi folks, welcome to another webinar. I'm here, although you wouldn't be able to guess it because I'm sat in a dark room in sunny Las Vegas, and I wanted to have another quick talk about my Asperger's diagnosis and specifically a couple of questions that came up around it. The first one being how having my Asperger's diagnosis did it or would it have affected my schooling? The second one being, how has it affected my employability as an adult? And so I think they're two very interesting questions and something that comes up quite regularly when you're talking to fellow technologists, like at the conference that I'm at this week. So I'm just going to go through those and try and answer some of those queries. So I never got diagnosed as autistic or Aspergic during my school career. It was very much after I left. It wasn't until I was 30 that I went and got referred and went to the doctors and got diagnosed Aspergic. And so that obviously being Aspergic had zero effect on my schooling directly. But then thinking back on it now, what would have been different, how would it have been different? And of course, awareness of autism and Aspergic disorders was far less back in the 80s and early 90s than it is now. The exposure, the stuff that you can find on the internet is, completely different. And so thinking back about my school years, they seemed pretty normal at the time. There was nothing completely odd or weird about them. Primary school, I look back on and remember fondly, It was interesting having to talk to different people, but I thought that was, completely normal. And going through the primary school phases, I had deep interests ever since I was at primary school in things like computers and technology and building electronic bits and pieces and, music, things that involved interacting with physical instruments. Be it computer instruments or, musical instruments. And, looking back on that now, it was a great period of my life to develop these deep interests and get really involved with something that I found very interesting in. Where I didn't excel at primary school all the way through was doing stuff that involved imagination, theory. I wasn't like music theory, I was terrible at. English, I wasn't very good at. Things that involved using parts of your brain that weren't necessarily logical. It was definitely a trickier experience for me. Coming up, I look back at English lessons where you're expected to, conjure up different environments in your head and write stories about them and experiences and that type of stuff. It was so tricky. Because I can't visualize these things particularly, it was just an awful lot of hard work. But because I wasn't diagnosed Aspergic or autistic at the time, of course, I was just expected to be able to do these things. And so those lessons, those subjects I didn't excel at primary school, secondary school, or, into GCSEs and A-levels, getting through school was always fine. I never had any great problems, doing my school education. What I did enjoy doing very much so was extracurricular activities, doing stuff outside of school, during lunch breaks, not necessarily outside of school hours, but certainly during lunch breaks, because instead of going on a break where you'd go and run around the field and stuff, which I found reasonably strange, I would go and do something structured, and so having clubs for music, recorder club, choir club, orchestras, technology, sort of in its infancy, but you could go and use the computer labs and that type of stuff when I was at, doing GCSEs and A-levels. That made a big difference because it gave me something to do when otherwise it would have been downtime and I would probably have just been stood, around the corner of the school, probably talking to no one, maybe. But, it's that type of thing. So keeping the structure, even during the breaks, was something that was quite important. And having gone on from, education and gone, in my career, I've now done support for an Aspergic specific school, autistic specific school in East Anglia, in the Norwich area. And that school for autistic people is absolutely amazing. The amount of support that they give the children, the way the school is designed, taking things off the wall to try and nullify sensory overload. They've put so much thought into it, and it's absolutely fantastic because it gives the autistic students who would normally get a bit of support in a normal primary school or just drop off the education system altogether. It gives them the ability to get through to A levels at least, through school, and give them a chance that they wouldn't normally have. Because I was in there doing computer programming training, and we were trying the absolute basics, and so many of them were jumping straight out of that onto more advanced things and doing stuff that I would expect A-level students to be doing, but because the way their brains are wired up, they were finding it so easy to do the more basic things. We had to give them stuff that's more challenging. And so there's a wealth of talent in the autistic and Aspergic sectors. It just needs to be harnessed. And I think technology companies have just started to realize that, which is why companies like Microsoft now have autistic specific interview processes that aren't a traditional interview process, and that's something that's really important because it allows these very talented young adults who may not have a particularly normal education, the ability to work in an industry which can obviously harness that talent because, there's an awful lot of autistic people who are extremely good at technology. Which sort of takes me on to the second question, which was, as an autistic person, what's it like sort of in employment? And I'm self-employed, but that's largely because I've tried to be employed and I'm not a very good employee. I got my first job, and that was quite good because it had an awful lot of flexibility where I wasn't doing very much. There wasn't a great deal expected of me. And so being able to find something to throw myself into for 3 weeks of the month when I wasn't required to do very much was really beneficial because it gave me the ability to learn, which is what, an awful lot of us like to do. And so being able to spend an awful lot of time on self-improvement then allowed me to then go and get a job in London, which was fun. But it still involved me meeting new people, which was an interesting, experience. But it became quickly apparent in a sort of more high-level job that I didn't have the ability to structure my day how I wanted to structure my day. I'm very much a night owl. I do far better work in the evening than I do during the daytime. I like to go off on tangents and investigate stuff that I find interesting that my business, my employers might not be too interested in. And so after a few years of working in London, it became apparent that going self-employed was probably going to be quite a good career move. And that's had its ups and its downs. But largely being self-employed allows me as a person earning a living to diversify, to pick different tangents, to go in different routes. There's interesting bits of self-employed life that make life tricky. Like I am terrible at networking. I don't mind going and talking at a conference like the one that I'm at this week and speaking to a few hundred people sat in a room who are all staring in my general direction because it means I'm probably talking about something that I understand and I'm comfortable talking about. What I don't like is if you're at the same conference and then you're by yourself and you go into a coffee room and people want to come up and have a chat with you and ask you questions, go, oh, hi, who are you? Why are you here? And that type of thing. I find that so uncomfortable. I cannot tell you how uncomfortable that is. But of course, as a speaker at a conference, people will generally come up to you to discuss the talk that you've given or the talk that you're going to give. And so it gives an Aspergic or autistic person the head start and, the likelihood is that I will be able to engage with you because I will know what you're likely to come and engage me about. Whereas if I'm not talking at an event, or if I'm sent to a networking event to try and drum up business or whatever, then talking to the people at these events is far, far more stressful. And I have been known to spend entire events pretending to be on the phone rather than having to converse with people, face to face, because I find that so tricky. Whereas, if you shoot me an email and then say, I'm going to give you a call at 2 p.m., I will pick up the phone at 2 p.m. and I will quite happily have a chat with you. And I'll probably talk your ear off because I know what you want to talk about. And it's I feel like with the way that I deal with life is the fear of the unknown drives more issues than anything else when it comes to, conversing with other people, which is ridiculous. And, I'm well aware that this is like a bit odd because most people aren't going to come and scream in your face. They just want to have a conversation with you. But, as an autistic person, I get really stressed out because it's strange talking to people that you don't know. You don't know what the conversation is likely to be about, even though I'm sure it'll be friendly. You struggle to string together sentences or follow flow of conversation. I can hear, like normally in these situations, I can hear everyone else talking in the room at the same time. So I've got like 15 different conversations flowing into my brain that I have to process. And so, trying to filter out the one that's being directed at me versus everyone else's is often quite a tricky experience. And so, going back to, employers and being employed, working in a business, it wasn't until I was self-employed that I started putting headphones on every day. And the difference that makes to my ability to work, and this should also count for education as well, the difference putting headphones on, completely over my ear headphones, and just playing music through them, makes such a difference to my ability to work. If I go to, an office these days, I have to take headphones because otherwise I can just hear every other conversation that's going on. I can hear every keyboard that's being tapped and typed at, and it is so exhausting that by the end of the day, I can't face coming back for the second day. And that, it's not because I don't want to converse with these people. I don't want to, I want to interact with my colleagues in offices. But there's a limit that I quite often hit. And so, it makes a big difference. So being autistic has an awful lot of benefits. It also, especially in crowded environments, has some, quite severe negatives when it comes to noise and stimulation, lights, sounds, the whole works. And so, be it in education or in employment, if people, managers, teachers, whatever they are, can spend more time accepting autistic people's quirks, because we're generally quite a friendly bunch. We don't normally sit there rocking. Like if you find me rocking, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I find it quite a relaxing thing to do. But people like, there's the crazy guy rocking in the corner. That's not the case. It's a trait that allows me to expend some energy that otherwise is just sort of like rocking around my body. We're not all completely mental. So, I hope that explains a few things. I hope that certainly the UK lower education system can do more for autistic children over the coming years, because there's so much that they have to offer. And I hope employers in the UK and around the globe, can understand that autistic people can function in the workplace. There may have to be the odd time where tweaks are made to allow them to function and operate in a more efficient manner. But that we're definitely an asset to businesses, especially working in the technical field. I have met so many autistic people since I started talking about it. It's untrue. They all work for large multinational technology firms, and so employers also shouldn't be scared of employing an autistic person. If they feel like that they are an asset to their business, then go ahead and give them a job and give them a chance. So there you go. Thanks for watching. I hope that is reasonably enlightening. If you've got any questions, stick them in the comments below. I'll happily get back to you. You can email me at tom@spicule.co.uk. You'll find me on Twitter, occasionally talking about autism, at Magical Trout. And hopefully I'll be back to do some more of these in the future. Bye for now.